Yeah, yeah. No.
Did it
That's
happen?
not my story.
I saw it.
Oh, here.
I'll
Hiding.
close
No, it's okay. It's my bag.
They've got 7 kids on it.
A lot of places in Congo.
I don't know if we, if anyone else, if we, wait 2 more minutes and do that. What do you think, Bernie? 2 more?
Yeah, no, I think you can go ahead. Greg's here, so.
Everybody here, so there we go. All right, now, here we go.
One more minute, I guess.
Oh, wait.
Right.
Okay.
Good? All right. Ready? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming this morning. My name is Irwin Zalkin, I-R-W-I-N-Z-A-L-K-I-N, and I am the senior partner of the Zalkin Law Firm. Yesterday, the Zalkin Law Firm filed a 480-page lawsuit against the Roman Catholic Bishop of San Diego, a corporation sole, which we commonly refer to as the San Diego Diocese. In that lawsuit, we are alleging that the diocese fraudulently transferred 291 properties to separate parish corporations, dummy corporations, and properties that are worth over $400 million to avoid having to pay fair compensation to victims of childhood sexual abuse. About 10 days ago, the diocese held a press conference, and Bishop McElroy sent a letter to all parishioners in which they claimed that because there were some 400 lawsuits that have been filed following the passage of legislation that revived older cases, that they no longer have the adequate assets to fairly compensate these victims. Such statements are not only pure fiction, but add insult to injury. This diocese and its parishes have engaged in a conspiratorial enterprise to defraud child abuse victims and to deny them the justice they deserve. Now let me walk you through how this scheme works. In 2010, the diocese formed separate parish corporations. Separate, but not without control of the bishop. It's very clear in the articles of incorporation of these parish corporations that the bishop controls these corporations, controls the hiring and firing of pastors, any effort by a parish to sell or otherwise encumber a property. That's all controlled by the bishop. They can't do that without the approval of the bishop. And if the parish were to dissolve for some reason, any properties that are held or owned by that parish revert back to the bishop corporation or the bishop or the diocese, if you will. Now this was in 2010. They didn't transfer any properties. The diocese, the bishop corporation sold, did not transfer any properties to these separate parish corporations in 2010. In 2018, approximately 1 month after a bill was introduced in the legislature that would revive older child sexual abuse claims, that would open a 3-year window to allow those claims to come forward now, the bishop formed a separate real estate holding corporation for each of these parishes. According to the articles of these separate real estate holding corporations, if at any time this corporation dissolves, those properties go back to the parish corporation and then go back to the bishop if the parish corporation dissolves. So these separate real estate holding corporations, ultimately the properties in those corporations revert back to the bishop. They didn't transfer any properties at this time. Why not? Because they wanted to wait and see what would happen with that bill. Why would they transfer these properties if that bill doesn't pass? It didn't pass. The governor at that time was Governor Brown, and he vetoed it. It passed the legislature, but Brown vetoed it. Then what happens? In 2019, we get a new governor, Governor Newsom. In 2019, a new bill is introduced, and it passes, and it gets signed by the governor. It gets signed in September of 2019 by the governor, and what happens? Grant deeds to 291 properties are issued in September of 2019, transferring valuable real estate assets to these various 93 parish real estate holding corporations. Properties like personal residences. And up here we have the example. We trace exactly what happened with Sacred Heart Parish. This is the parish corporation. This is the real estate holding corporation. This is the grant deed. And those are the properties that many properties got transferred, but this is an example of some of the properties that got transferred. Personal residences. Why did that happen? Clearly, they waited to see what was going to happen with this legislation, and they waited till it passed before they transferred properties. That is fraud. That is a fraudulent transfer to avoid creditors, and these survivors are creditors. And if they go into a bankruptcy, these survivors will be called tort creditors. And if you transfer your assets to avoid creditors, you transfer assets knowing that you're doing that for no other valuable consideration. Nothing was paid for these properties by the parishes. That's a fraudulent transfer. And this lawsuit seeks to reverse those transfers. Whether that's going to happen in the civil court where this lawsuit was filed, or if they do file a bankruptcy, then we'll litigate it in the bankruptcy. Any questions? Was that clear?
Is it just real estate that got assets that were transferred,
Right.
or were there others?
No. real estate that we know.
The 200 and, did you say 91 properties,
Yes,
all in San Diego County,
not all. Some are actually outside the county.
but in California?
Okay.
Can you break down the different types of properties that, it's been
Yeah,
transferred to?
so from what we can tell, there are anywhere from commercial strip centers to vacant lots, to personal residences, to religious schools and parish buildings.
So it just isn't the churches or the church grounds, it's all.
No. Yeah, let me explain how that works. So what is a parish? A parish is not just the church. A parish is a territory within the diocese. And what they did is any properties that were within a particular parish territory, like our Sacred Heart parish territory, those properties got transferred to that parish real estate holding corporation.
And the boundaries of the parishes are set by the diocese?
Yes.
Today is Ash Wednesday. Can you talk about the timing of this announcement?
Well, it wasn't timed because it was Ash Wednesday, that's coincidence, but, it speaks volumes as to the moral conduct or lack of moral conduct of this diocese, and in a greater respect to how the Catholic Church has handled these cases and survivors and child sexual abuse victims for decades. They have developed a PR spin on how they're concerned about victims and they want to do the right thing by victims, but at the end of the day, it's all about the money and protecting their assets, protecting their brand over protecting the safety and welfare of children.
What do you hope will come from the lawsuit?
Well, what I hope will come from the lawsuit is that these transfers will be reversed and these properties will revert back to the diocese and be assets of the diocese as they are and they should be.
I think I was busy following you, moving around, and I'm not sure if I processed what you said. Can you speak again on how this affects the bankruptcy that the diocese filed?
Well, they haven't filed a bankruptcy. They announced that they were considering filing a bankruptcy. And so if they do file a bankruptcy, in a bankruptcy, they have to identify what their assets are. That's an important part of a bankruptcy is full transparency of the financial status of the debtor, which is what they would be. And the question will be whether these properties that got transferred are assets of the diocese or not. They're claiming, no, they're not our assets. Look, they belong into these separate corporations. And we're saying, no, not so fast. Those got transferred knowing that you were likely going to file a bankruptcy, knowing that you were facing hundreds of lawsuits, and you divested yourself of assets so you would then be able to claim, oh, we don't have these assets, which is what they're doing right now.
Because that bankruptcy to the people who are seeking restitution would mean what?
Would mean that if they divest themselves of assets, would mean that there are not enough assets to pay the damages that these people deserve.
That's
So
the
you
bottom
want it
line.
reversed?
That's the bottom line.
So this began in 2010, 2018, 2019. In order to win, do you have to prove that all these steps were done because they knew they were going to file bankruptcy in 2022? I mean, how do you
No, I
make
think
that connection?
I think it's enough, Greg, for us to prove that they made these transfers in 2019 when they knew and waited until the bill passed and they knew they were going to be facing hundreds of lawsuits. That's really, I think, enough to make a prima facie case, what we call a prima facie case.
So even though they say we're just doing for another reason, some sort of corporate reorganization, you don't necessarily have to make that direct line connection.
We don't. They can use that and try to make it, they can try to defend and say, oh, no, that's not the reason, although it looks like that, there's a backstory to that. And they're gonna argue that they've always held these properties in trust for the parishes. This is only perfecting that now.
So what do you say to that argument then? I mean, what's your
Well,
counter?
that's just simply not true. They've never, first of all the properties were always titled forever in the name of the Roman Catholic bishop of Corporation Sole. All the deeds and all the titles were always in the bishop Corporation Sole name. He had complete control of those properties. And in fact, there was a lawsuit several years ago by a group of parishioners who had invested the money to build a parish, and this was up in Oceanside, to build a parish. The parish was on the deed, or these, of the property along with the bishop. And the bishop then decided later on to transfer that property to St. Vincent de Paul. And these people, the parishioners, sued the bishop and said, you can't do that because we funded this, we built this parish, our name's on the title of this parish, it's not your parish to give away. And the bishop said, oh yes it is, I own it, it's in my name, I don't care if it's in your name too, but under canon law and under, our policies and guidelines, etc., it's our property, and he won.
One other quick follow-up. Last time I talked to Diocese spokesperson, Kevin, his last name is escaping me.
Echo or something?
Thank you. Yeah. He told me the rough timeline on whether or not they're gonna make a decision. It's gonna be late May, early June. How does this timeline play out regarding the lawsuit that you're announcing today?
I can't make decisions for them. I don't know what they're gonna do or when they're gonna do it. I don't know if this is gonna prompt them to file their bankruptcy sooner. That's gonna be up to them.
But how does this move forward from here? Like what comes
Well,
next?
this is a civil lawsuit in the Superior Court of San Diego. And this is gonna get added on to the existing coordinated proceedings in front of Judge Sturgeon, Eddie Sturgeon, who has all of the San Diego Diocese cases, all the lawsuits, about 400 cases against the Diocese of San Diego. He's the coordination judge for all of those. And our firm is liaison counsel. We're appointed by Judge Sturgeon as the liaison to all the other lawyers that are representing victims. And so we kind of work closely with him. And this is gonna get added on to those other lawsuits, and we'll see what happens. I don't know what he'll do, whether he'll stay it. Likely he'll stay it for now, which means he's not gonna let it proceed for the moment till he sorts out what's gonna happen.
What does this say to the diocese? I mean, are you gonna constantly be on them trying to look for things like this to help the restitution?
Always. Relentlessly. This isn't our first rodeo with the diocese. They filed a bankruptcy in 2007, and we were very involved in going after them then, in that bankruptcy too.
So along those lines and just kind of procedurally, so a bankruptcy filing, if they file for bankruptcy, that stays all litigation against them.
Right.
So do you have to get this resolved before then?
This'll get transferred, everything will get transferred to the bankruptcy court, as will this. And it'll get litigated in the bankruptcy.
Okay.
Are you hearing from victims or anything about the constant, bankruptcy possibly being filed, this happening? What are victims saying?
Yeah, I'll tell you what victims are saying. When they heard, when that press release came out, or that press conference came out, which was a total surprise, we got a lot of calls from clients who were really pissed. Because it's upsetting, they don't know what bankruptcy means. They hear bankruptcy and they think, oh my God, what does this mean? I'm not gonna be compensated, the diocese is gonna escape responsibility. That's their reaction, because they don't understand what is involved in a bankruptcy. So we have to explain to them that no, even if they file a bankruptcy, that actually in some ways could work to their benefit. so.
Well, what is their reaction to this newest lawsuit, this component of the real estate?
You know, most of them are like, go get them. Honestly, that's kind of the reaction, you know. If they're trying to hide their assets, good for you, go expose that.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Can you kind of, sorry, just for reference, can you kind of tell us what are these, just so we have it? Like what the documents are?
Okay.
Just like explain like what they are.
Okay, so this is when a corporation gets formed, they file something called articles of incorporation. Okay, and in the articles of incorporation, you include certain information about what the corporation is going to be, what powers, who will have powers within the corporation, that sort of thing. So this describes in 2010 the articles of incorporation for pastor of Our Lady of the Sacred Heart Catholic Parish, San Diego Corporation Sole. Okay, when you say a corporation sole, it just basically means a religious corporation. Okay, and here it describes that the bishop, who's not a pastor of the parish, will have power over the pastor, will have decision-making power with respect to who is the pastor, removing or appointing a pastor, and basically the governance of that corporation. And then it also includes information about what happens if the corporation should dissolve for some reason. Then all the property, the parish property, goes to the bishop, corporation sole, or we call it the diocese. Most people refer to it as the diocese. Okay? So that's what this is, and that was for these parish corporations, religious corporations, were formed in 2010, and there was no property that was transferred to these corporations. And then in 2018, they formed another type of corporation, the bishop did, that is called a real estate property support corporation for different parishes, for the 93 parishes. And that real estate support corporation was intended to hold real estate, real property. But they never transferred any real property in 2018. And then this other document here is an example of a grant deed where they did transfer the properties in 2019 after law got passed allowing older victims a 3-year window to file lawsuits for child sexual abuse against institutions, perpetrators and institutions like the Catholic Church, right? So when that happened, they transferred the deeds that month. I mean, they're all, I think, dated 2019. September, maybe through November of 2019, they transferred 291 properties. And that last one is just an example of a couple of private homes that were obviously gifted to the bishop and got transferred to the Sacred Heart Corporation.
Erwin, I do have one other quick question. Do you want to go first? In 2007, the payouts basically ended up, bankruptcy filing was tossed and then the payouts came in full. How important is this lawsuit that you're now bringing up in order for victims to get paid the full amounts that they deserve?
Critically important. Because obviously it's all about what assets the diocese has, what insurance coverage they have, what's available to them as a financial resource to compensate the victims. So obviously, look, the tax assessed value of these properties is about $400 million. That's tax assessed. So there's a difference between tax assessed and market value. Tax assessed doesn't assess the dirt, it assesses the improvement. Okay, so these properties, while the aggregate tax assessed value is about $400 million, the market value of these properties could be through the roof, especially prime property in San Diego.
And one other quick follow-up to that. Without your law firm's filing of this lawsuit, how difficult would it be for the victims to actually get these payouts? Like, is this critically
Yeah, I
important?
think this is the linchpin issue, you know, for what will likely be a bankruptcy.
Is the alternative for them if you, or either if you lose, or if you hadn't done this, would they have to sue each of the parish corporations serially, like individually?
Yeah, but only, you know, you can sue them only to the extent that something happened at that parish, or it was a priest or a clergy or other religious affiliated with that parish. So, and we've done that. I mean, our firm has sued the parishes too. So we sort of anticipated this, and we've sued the parishes too.
Can you talk about the other part of the lawsuit? It's about the diocese independent evaluation process for survivors and how that works, or how that configures it?
Independent evaluation, they did a thing, a few years ago where they, set up these, ICC, the ICP, what were they called, ICC? Independent compensation. Yeah, independent compensation programs, where they said, look, if you come directly to us, we'll do an evaluation and we'll offer you, if we feel it's a meritorious claim, we'll offer you a certain amount of money. And it was very low numbers. And it really intended to try to, you know, people who might be desperate to just get something and not want to get involved in lawsuits or wait for the legislature to pass a bill. They did that. They did that in New York, and then they did that here. And their whole goal was to try to pick off as many victims as they could with this process. And I think they ran it for about 2 years.
And those people are no longer eligible to
That's right.
go lawsuits.
That's right. Anything else?
Thank you.
Great, thank you all for coming. Spanish speaker right here.
The old and the young.
Sorry.
We have, Alfredo.
You wanna do it there? You wanna do it individually? Because I mean, the average person here lost an earlier pay.
You guys want